Last year, we developed a facilities committee that goes through and reviews the facility needs of the Bremerton School District. And so that's made up of various community members and district folks. And went through and did a prioritization of some of the projects, capital needs projects in the school district. And in determining what those projects were, we have a couple that are need to be addressed sooner rather than later. So the whole idea behind this was to take basically a 25-year look at what are all of the needs that we're going to have in Bremerton as far as facilities go over the next 25 years. And in doing that, the committee identified the needs and then broke down when the needs would need to be most addressed. So we looked at the first 4 years, what needs to be addressed in the first 4 years, then 5 to 10, kind of 10 to 15, and then 15 plus. So in looking at that, there were several small capital projects. Some, for us, small capital projects are something that wouldn't require a massive bond, so something like under $5 million. So the roof of the high school, for instance, is a $2 million project. And even though that's really, it's a big number for most people, for a roof project, it's not rebuilding the entire high school, which would be obviously a multi-million-dollar project. But in this case, the roof needs addressing. Some of the capital projects have the ability to get matching funds from the state. There's a state capital projects fund that matches funds within districts depending on a timeline basis. So the state outlines which types of projects, how old they are, and then whether or not they'll be matched. So some of these projects get matched. The roof at the high school, for instance, is one that gets matched. So even though it's a $2 million project, it's actually only going to cost us about $1 million because half of that's going to be covered by the state. And we waited a little bit on this last year in the last biennium at the legislature. There was no guarantee that the capital matching funds were going to continue. In the past, the legislature has always said, here's this fund, capital matching funds, and it'll be there. So when districts want to apply for these projects, the money will definitely be there. Well, as you know, the state had several financial impacts. And last year when they cut mid-year in the middle of that biennium, they said, well, we can't guarantee that these are always going to be there. But as the outlook has improved, they have become much more firm in their commitment to the capital fund, matching funds being there. So that prompted us then to be able to explore this and say, okay, what can we do and how can we accomplish this? So this is one of the avenues that school districts have, bonds and levies. That's how we raise money for large projects. We also try and set aside money, obviously, that we have for our allocation that we get for our students. But in this particular case, we're looking at a levy, 4-year in duration. And so there's a certain amount that goes out. We're looking at collecting roughly $1.9 million a year, so a total of $7.6 million over 4 years.
The state capital matching program that you mentioned, is that something that's going to be reviewed by the legislature annually, or is there any assurance? I mean, what assurance do you have that it would last through the 4 years of this levy?
Well, I think that in the past, it's never been a question. The money's always gone in there. It wasn't until the middle of this last biennium that there was even any question of it not being there. I think that enough buildings and school districts said, look, we've got major projects that need to be done, or major buildings that need to be renovated or rebuilt. Without those matching funds, we just can't do a lot of that. So as firm as they are with anything else, I look forward to that continuing to happen.
But I guess what I'm asking is, and I guess maybe you don't know, if they were to commit to matching the roof project,
right?
Are there others in this list of capital improvements that are going to also be applied for a match? Is everything you do applied for a match, or is there certain criteria?
There are certain criteria, and again, it's years. There's a year So for instance, right now, most of the major capital projects have to be outside of a 25-year span. So when you're looking at the high school roof, because that was built in 87, this is 2012, that was 25 years ago. So they look at, okay, that's met the mark. Certain buildings built at certain times qualify for the matching funds at different times.
But when they commit to it, if it's in all of the projects would have to be done within that year. They can't be ongoing.
Not necessarily. Once you qualify, you basically apply, and they'll say, yes, we have the funds in here for you to do that. But and once you qualify, just because we just now qualify doesn't mean that it's going to go away in a year or two. Once you've kind of met that time commitment, anytime your district decides to tackle that project, you already have qualified for that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that's what I was asking. One of the things you're doing is adding classrooms at West Hills Elementary, and I assume that's because the STEM program has been popular there. One of the population projections has Bremerton kind of going down. Is this moving kids around? Is it because you're so sure that you will have kids wanting to go to that school? Is that going to result in kind of less needs at some of the other schools?
I don't think it's really going to lessen a lot in the other schools. Yes, we do have a lot of committed parents for West Hills, and they want to continue that. They would like to see a real continuity there. Obviously, we have classrooms that are filled everywhere, and we would not have a classroom anywhere that was not fully filled. So, is it going to lessen the burden at the middle middle
View,
school?
because
Yeah,
it's-
Mountain View, exactly. It could have a very slight impact, but I think that we will retain students because they want to continue in West Hills rather than seek an alternative school in another district. And we also see that we have children coming in from out of district that want that STEM program.
That only want to go to West Hill.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And we have such a good fold over into the high school, from the STEM school there into the STEM program at the high school.
Has that changed your your enrollment predictions?
Well, we need to do another demographic study to begin with, because the original one that was done by Les Kendrick back in 2007 had Bremerton School District already kind of pulling out, bottoming out last year really and starting to add. But we continue to decline at a slower pace than previously, as all Kitsap school districts are declining in enrollment. It's just something that we're going to need to do again to have them take a look at projections, enrollment projections. But most of our decline that's happening is more at the secondary level. The elementary actually is a real challenge. Other than Kitsap Lake has a couple of classrooms not filled, but literally there's not one classroom space available at Naval Avenue. There's not one classroom space available at West Hills or View Ridge or Arminjar. I mean, they're all packed to the brim. So we do need the capacity at that elementary level. At some point, it would be great when we do a bond and have to rebuild Naval to make it a larger building so that it can accommodate all the way up to 5th grade like the rest of the elementaries, and then that way students don't have to go over to West Hills when they get to 4th grade. They can keep the continuity within their particular building. So some of this is adding capacity at the elementary level, which is a good thing. That's what we like to see. And we're hoping that those enrollment trends at the elementary level will then continue back into the secondary level.
That you would kind of stop losing kids.
Right.
Which, that's been the case.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
How does it affect, or how will it affect the transportation? Because if it's going to be open for your district, that would be a heavy burden, or a heavier burden on your transportation, I would assume.
Well, currently the program is for West Hills attendance area families, or Naval Avenue, because West Hills is the school that they would go to for 4th and 5th grade. So we do the transportation within our enrollment and boundary areas. As far as students who want to go there for the middle school, it's an optional program. So if you live in the West Hills or Naval Avenue attendance area, transportation will take you there. It's not any more than we pay right now. If you, for instance, live in East Bremerton and wanted to go to West Hills, then it would be incumbent upon a family to figure out how to get over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you catch me up on what the STEM Academy is, please?
Sure. So STEM is an acronym for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. So this is a focus on more math and science instruction, especially at the elementary level, but this is going to carry through to grades 6, 7, and 8. So there'll be 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders in a building that currently doesn't have that. So we're expanding the capacity there. And the difference really at the elementary level is that typically at the elementary level, science is delivered through FOSS science kits. FOSS is another acronym for the kits that come together. They're basically project based, and they come every week or two, and students spend a couple of days working on the project base. But then in the interim, there's not a lot of science instruction that happens. At the STEM Academy, they have science instruction every single day. So they use the FOSS kits, but they go beyond FOSS in their science instruction. Same with math. So the afternoon, there's probably about a 2-hour block where they're doing project-based learning. And of course, anybody for the community, if you'd like to check it out, come on over there. It's really fascinating to see that. We've been doing tours of many other school districts interested in how we're doing that. And we actually, 2 weeks ago, had Superintendent Randy Dorn in to see the instructional practices. So it's good. We're waiting to see what our student outcome data is going to look like after this first year. And then, of course, we continue to modify and hopefully improve the instruction that we have for our students there.
You've got central kitchen down here, 29% of your expenditure, projected expenditures, but you don't mention it here in the text. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Currently, our central kitchen is out of the old East High school site, which is right next to View Ridge off of Wheaton Way. And it was not originally designed to be a central kitchen to do meals for several thousand students. It was designed to be a high school kitchen. We've modified that a little bit to do meals year-round. We serve meals for students during the summer as well. And Bremerton has a very high free and reduced lunch population, over 60%. So every day you're talking about 3,000, 3,500 meals being prepared in the size of a regular high school kitchen, which is not adequate. So in this case, we're looking to build a new facility which is larger, more efficient, and designed to be more of a central kitchen and not a high school kitchen to modify that. In addition to just the preparation space, we're also looking at instructional space so that students can come in and parents or community members and figure out a little bit more about child nutrition and what we do. So we're hoping to have viewing areas where people can see what's going on in the kitchen, and maybe even a small test kitchen so we can have students come over and then try their hand at certain nutritional aspects.
Where would it be?
Right now we have it projected at the old East High site, different spot. It's part of the development of that whole campus for the Youth Wellness Center.
So it would
Youth
be in
Wellness
partnership
Campus.
with the Boys and Girls Club? Are those
Same
two-
location, but they're two
But they're
different
separate
entities.
entities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds
Yeah.
pretty ambitious. What's the low-cost option?
Well, to continue to do what we're doing,
You can't expand the current, or overhaul the current kitchen and build onto it, make it more efficient.
not at that particular site. I mean, it's just not designed. If you expand, the old East High site was built in the early 50s. And so anything you're looking at as far as expansion, knocking out walls, redoing roof or anything else like that, we have abatement issues over there with asbestos and lead paint. So it makes anything over there pretty expensive to.
So this would be
get
a
into.
new standalone facility, kind
Correct.
of where the ball fields are there? Is that, I'm just trying to get a picture in my head.
No, probably between the where the gym is and Legion Field. So
Oh, on that side.
the backside,
By
the part
outlets.
where the fields, ball fields are, that's kind of where the teen center is projected to be.
But the one kitchen will supply all the food for all the schools?
Correct.
Is that more, so there's no kitchen is done on site at any of the elementary
Correct.
schools?
Right.
Or anywhere else?
Most of the places, when I was back in elementary school, you probably remember there, some kitchens would do some of the preparation, but for the most part, cost effectiveness, efficiency, most of the food is prepared centrally and then either kept warm or rewarmed at another spot. The nutritional guidelines, though, are becoming more and more onerous, especially the new ones that are coming out. The paperwork involved and everything else, I mean, it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
This is maybe a kind of a side note to the levy, but with the old junior high site and that building that you're talking about, what is the future for that? Is there opportunity to sell it, to bring revenue into the school district? How are you going to deal with that?
Well, hopefully the spots that we have there are for lease. So we'll do leases, for instance, with the Boys and Girls Club. But selling of the property, that's, even though it's a big location, it's zoned two different ways now, which we've been discovering as we went along. So there's a portion that goes along the Wheaton Way business corridor, I guess, that was rezoned. So part of that,
Just like along the
yeah.
road up there.
So it's however many feet in off of Wheaton Way. It's just kind of, a line drawn pretty much straight up. The rest of the facility is really we still use a lot of the fields. We rent out a lot of the fields, including the gym. And the woods and everything else back there, the school district owns. If there were ever a time where we would need to build another facility, another school, that gives us the ability to still have the land to be able to do that. So,
And the
yeah.
lease and rental income kind of provides for, I guess I imagine you have to keep the heat on in all these places.
Sure.
Keep them updated. Is that a good?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Making money on the deal?
supposed to be, we don't make money off it. We're not a for-profit industry, but we cover our costs. We also don't do the gift of public funds by saying, hey, we're not going to charge you anything. They'll cover their own utilities. The lease costs are basically around the maintenance and everything else that's going to need to happen there. But the facility itself, most of the rest of the facility has been pared down as far as where the electricity and utilities go, so that really the only function in there right now is the central kitchen. And we have issues with vandalism and people breaking into there, it being kind of an attractive nuisance. So the sooner we can get rid of that, the better it is, I think, for everybody.
And the idea is then you could just lock the doors on the whole place and not have to run it.
Well, the idea is to eventually get it all bulldozed, so there's nothing there to lock doors on.
But
and
that
then
would be
develop
after
other places.
anything to this levy fund.
Correct, yeah.
Let me go back to the levy itself here. There are two things that generally go wrong with any major project. First, it's misestimating, and then project creep. So, for voters that are going to be, deciding on this, how are you going to, maybe you could explain a little bit about how you came about arriving at these particular figures, and then how do you intend on controlling the project, particularly the kitchen, which is very easy to spiral out of control if you start taking out additional suggestions or modifications.
Yeah, we have cost estimates on both already. That we have. We're actually going through a design process for the addition at West Hills. So, and we have a budget for that. And built into any of the budgets is basically a percentage for soft costs or overrun. So you just put that in the budget to make sure that it's there, just in case you go awry. On the kitchen, same thing. It's pretty easy design. It's just a shell. So there's nothing complicated about it. And then the internal costs, where you can kind of get out of control, is with the materials inside if you're not careful. Our director of child nutritional services, though, is fantastic. She knows exactly what she needs. We have some money already set aside for most of the materials. So ovens, mixers, things like that. Basically, we already have money set aside for that. So most of the money in there is for the shell costs of building the actual facility. Should be pretty quick and pretty simple. We're not designing anything too complex. We want it to be as green as possible and efficient as possible. So we're not trying to build a mausoleum to child nutrition services. It's just what's going to be functional for what it is that we need to do, and that's its only purpose too.
Well, you said you had cost estimates. Does that mean you're going sole source, or are you going to have a competitive bid, because all bets are off
Right.
when you start throwing that out for people to put a figure on it?
Competitive bid process. We're bound by law to over a certain amount that we have to have a competitive bid process. And right now, actually, especially for school projects, competitive bids are pretty good. You get a lot more for your dollar than we were getting, say, 8 years ago. So right now, if the bid doesn't come in to something that satisfies us, then we wait until we get a bid that works for us.
Well, if I heard you right, it sounds like you designed a budget for the kitchen And the expansion, before you have a design, how can you figure out how much it's going to cost if you don't have a design?
For the kitchen, we do have a design. For the additions, we have a couple of ideas about what the design is. So we had some initial sketches done by somebody to say, here's what it might look like if you have 6 or 8 classroom spaces plus here. Then we factor in what are the kind of area general construction costs associated with that. And then you have the supplies and materials inside. What is it going to cost for tables, chairs, monitors, things like that. So when you get to the actual bid, so that's kind of a general. But as you get more specific about what exactly is this going to look like, what are all the corners and angles, then you get specific in the bid. So the initial part to come up with a figure was, in general, I mean, if someone gave us a rough estimate, what do you think this would cost us? So we're not just shooting it out there too far. We have people from architecture firms who do construction of either schools or school additions that give us a general idea about what this is going to cost.
Let me step back just to Peter's question. When you came up with it's 61 cents per $1,000 in valuation. That's the last thing that we recorded, at least. What kind of public involvement have you had as far as kind of gauging that, as far as coming up with what that figure was going to be as you prepared this levy?
Well, we had our citizens committee working with that. We went out to the schools and through the PTA, through any parents that would be interested. We advertised that they could come in and sit on a committee. We pulled together just interested citizens from the community that would.
How many people are we talking about?
Oh my goodness, how many were in the?
It's hard to say. I mean, you'd probably have to talk to the folks from the Citizens for Good Schools to get a count on that.
Yeah, I honestly do not have a firm figure. But we did advertise it a lot, and also through our site. Anybody that would go onto the site and see, our website, if they were interested, they could come on to and they knew how to get connected to that committee. So yeah, we had a lot of interested people at different meetings. Different people would show up at different meetings. So again, it's kind of hard to say exact numbers.
And what have you heard? What's your feedback so far on how willing people are to support something of this?
We, as a board, we wanted to know how really, we were asking the public, how willing are they? Give us a litmus test. And they were very willing when they heard exactly what it was going to be for. The items that the committee had come up with, they were 100% behind it. They really felt that, yes, we need to do it and we need to start now. We can't put it off for another 10 years. We can't put it off for another 2 years. We need to start looking and planning and being very careful in our plans. So we, asked the committee members and what their reaction was and what they heard from their constituents.
As far as the cost goes, basically took a look at the cost of all the projects and then added it up, divided by 4, and then, how much is it going to cost you? The cost per 1,000 varies depending on the valuation every year by the county assessor. So that's why you go out for a figure, 7.6 million, because the rate can change from year to year. So we're hoping actually that rate actually goes down. I mean, that would be ideal, because that means that the housing market's doing better, everybody's house is worth a little bit more. So that's where we're going, but that's our best estimation. So you just take that and divide it out by the number of years.
Are you going to have a project manager for each individual project, or are you just going to try to centrally manage all of them at the same time?
Yeah, we have our director of facilities has done project management for most of the stuff we've done in the past. So we'll take a look and see if he's there. If not, we work in the particular cost on the project management for each project. So again, these aren't really huge projects. If you're talking about building an entire school, you definitely have to have a dedicated person usually associated with that. But for some of the other projects that are a little bit smaller, if you have someone who has good experience on project management, then typically you can do okay on that.
You mentioned that these were on the list of a longer list of 25 years, and all of these are to come. Where do these, as far as size, as far as scope, are they bigger? Are there are they smaller and there's bigger things lower on that list that people are going to have to, you know, is there a new school floating somewhere in there that's going to be asked for in 10 years?
Sure.
How do these compare with everything else on that list?
Yeah, they vary. I mean, some of the other projects, we definitely have a couple of schools that will need to be replaced. The 3 elementary schools that I can think of are Naval, Arminger, and View Ridge. I mean, they're all pretty old, but we have to make sure that they all fall within the matching funds for the capital project fund out of the state. And I think they all do. I mean, if we could go for a bond right now and do that, and I felt comfortable in that, I would suggest it. But right now, the economy isn't really strong enough to support a lot of bonds, and in this particular area, it would just push the rate up way too high. So some of that is staggering these out again over the next 25 years. So in that time frame, then you pay off some of your levies and your bonds, and then you have another one kind of come up as needed. But you know, I mean, some of the Naval Avenue, for instance, when you walk through there, you know, you can only maintain something for so long. Eventually, you have to replace it. And it's tough. I can tell you, going through and reading a history of the district when I first got here, it's the same argument that's been going on for 100+ years. You know, how do we build it? I don't know if I want my bond, you know, taxes going to pay for a bond for a new school. That's the case every time you have a bond or a levy that comes up, is the voters have to make their decision on there, and hopefully the support is there that we have, but we kind of gauge the interest. And looking at the trends lately between bonds and levies right now, this levy made sense to address some of the issues there that really needed to be replaced. You know, besides the couple of the roofs, we have many of the roofs actually being addressed. Fire panels in each of the buildings too.
Oh, the roof repairs we're looking here is more than just the high school?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
More than 2.
Yeah, high school, I think it's actually 4 or 5 of the buildings have roof repairs. Yeah.
Can you explain maybe a little more about the technology and energy upgrades? I'm sorry, it's somewhere.
Sure. The technology that we're looking at, we put aside money right now in our budget, but it's not very much compared to what we need. We know the technology changes quickly, and our support for technology, we have more assessments that are coming in online. We have more requirements of reporting that are online. We have a good infrastructure, but we don't have the same amount of funds to keep up with all of that, and you know, make sure that we have good instruction and our class sizes are as good as they can be. So in this particular levy, we're dedicating money for refreshing technology, continued IT support, and hardware and software purchases. So, and I can't tell you what hardware and software it is, because each year we're setting money aside. If you can tell me what the technology is going to be and how much it's going to cost in 3 years, I'd love to hear it. But it's ever changing. The good thing about it is that it's getting more efficient and cheaper. So that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. It's more mobile too. So we're having to look at technology that's really going to work for our students and prepare them for what they're going to be facing when they're out of school. So this is looking at a refresh cycle on a pretty consistent basis.
Throughout the district?
Correct.
It's not broken down?
Correct.
Based on schools?
Yeah.
It's kind of evenly spread out?
Yep.
These state assistance funds, are those the matching funds in here on your revenue resource?
Correct.
So if it's $1 million towards one roof, you're really not getting a lot more, that's $600,000.
Right.
Do you feel that's still a gamble when you actually start the project? Are those matching funds going to be there?
Yeah, I think they'll be there. I'm not worried about that. They've committed to that for the following year. And then when they start their session to do the biennium, they'll be out there again. You know, probably, I believe State Senator Kilmer is on that particular board, so he might be someone who can answer that question actually more aptly. But everything I've been hearing is that that's no longer in jeopardy like it was about a year ago.
It sounds like the West Hill STEM Academy, and this is my own kind of, as I look at all of the different credits we have, that's the one that helps you actually grow as a district. Am I reading into that correctly? And what happens if you're not able to expand that building to bring in the 7th and 8th grade? I mean, can those classes be taken at Mountain View? Is there a way to kind of bridge those two schools?
Well, I mean, we want it all to be there.
Right, it's simpler for parents.
Yeah.
Yes, but what do you, I mean, you're still going to want to pursue that to bring kids into the district, to
Correct.
families here.
Right.
How do you do it without this if you're not able to just add?
Yeah, repurposing space that's probably in there, which is not ideal and doesn't really
At West Hills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in some cases, you've had buildings, and I haven't gone into this with them because I'd want to deal with that if we have to face that. But in some cases, they take away space that's dedicated for something else, and they say, okay, well, we're not going to have a library, or we're going to shrink our gym a little bit, or we're going to do something to get the space that you need in order to get the program going. We're doing a couple of other things to increase some classroom space. We have the fire station that's out there. The district actually has that. So we're converting that into a couple of classroom spaces right now to meet the needs of the capacity that we have there in the interim. So we're actually building 3 classroom spaces out there, converting it from fire station into an instructional space.
What is the kind of projected growth at that school then?
Well, if we project out with the 7th and 8th grade,
Yeah, assuming this
Yeah.
happens, what's the?
with 6, 7, and 8 total by the 2013 school year, when it's P8, it would be 190, basically 65 students per grade level, 6, 7, and 8. So it's 195 additional students.
What happens, or what contingency plans do you have if something does go south and you get an escalation in costs in one or more projects? Are you going to are you going to scale back or cancel something, or what's your feeling on this?
Yeah, I mean, we'd probably have to figure out what we would do. These rates are, the downside of a levy is that you can only collect the money each year. So the difference between the bond and a levy is in the bond, you could sell all the bonds up front if you wanted to. Take all that collection early, then spend it out over several years. In this particular case, we can't really do an advance of $1.9 million. We have to wait until we collect it each year. So as we go through, we'll figure out, okay, what year are we, how far are we along, what are we going to have to do in order to complete this particular project. So we'll start knocking down the projects one at a time. The other part is, again, as we bid them out, we got to make sure that they're coming in on bid. So if someone gives us a project on a bid on one of our projects and it turns out to be a lot larger, that may have to recycle until a little bit later, and then we'll tackle a different project that's a little bit smaller.
So your capital limited each year, so you're going to have to basically pay for the project incrementally.
In some cases. In others, some of the projects may not be maximizing the full 1.9 million, so we'll just carry over some of those funds to the following year to make sure that we have that, can complete that. And some of the projects take quite a bit of time. So the central kitchen, depending on how you time it, if you time it to get it started and then it finishes at the 1 year, you start collecting it the next year, basically you have a time frame where you've got 2 years of levy money together where you can get that paid for within the project at the time.
When does the Mountain View, there's a bond that's still being paid for Mountain View's construction,
Correct.
is that correct? When does that retire?
2005 was when it passed. I think it's 20 years.
It was 2012.
I think.
25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we took a look at the, there have been a couple of school districts that actually refinanced their bonds. In some cases, it makes sense to do that. In this particular case, much like other pieces, there's a window in which you can do that. And we're not in that window to refinance. So we're still in the spot where bondholders are saying, hey, you know, you can't refinance now. You have this window. Once you're outside that window, then you could look at refinancing.
So that is coming in the next few years?
It's possible. I mean,
What's the window dependent on?
it depends on A, how they were sold, what type of bonds they were, and then just kind of what the regulations are right now. So we checked with our bond company that sold those bonds for us, and they said, nah, you really can't sell them right now. There's a penalty if you do, and the penalty basically wipes out any savings. But for other districts, they've done that. It's, you know, if you're able to do that, it's great because it can save you a lot of money. Right now, we're just not able to do that.
It seems to me, and I don't know too much about the politics of timing these elections, but it seems like August is kind of late in the game. I mean, if it doesn't pass, what do you do, and so forth and so on. How did you select that date?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about that date. Number one, we wanted to make sure we heard from the community first. And that didn't really start until probably November, December of last year. Well, you and I both know November and December just are not good months for people to gather together. So it was January. So then there's a certain time in which you have to file that you're going to, go into the election. And we didn't want to rush it. We wanted to make sure that what we knew we would need, we were asking for. Not any more, not any less. So in order for all those pieces to come together, it was past the time when they say the best time is in April.
February.
Sorry. Best time is in February. So we had passed that. We could not go out in February. They said the second best time in the whole year from different surveys that had been done was August. We didn't want to go out in the major election because we thought in November we'd get lost. So August it was.
What's the cost for this election?
Depends on how many other things
Yeah.
are on the ballot. So we roughly estimate about $40,000 to anytime we do a levy. The last time we did it in February 2010, I think it was $42,000 for us to run that.
What would the cost been in November when you're in a general election?
I don't know, maybe, I'm guessing, but maybe 35, 37. You get a little bit of reduction. But any of the bonding or levy companies that are out there, they would say, don't run it in November. It's just the percentage of passage is just not very good, and so you don't want it to get buried on page 4 of a ballot. You want to make sure people have the time to read it. April's not a good month either, and the state has limited the number of times that you can go out. It used to be you could go out February, March, April, August, November, I think even October. There were 6 months that you could go out. Now it's down to 4. So they keep eliminating the months. So it's February, April, August, and November are the only times that you can go out and run levies or bonds.
Is August 7th, is that the primary day?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be on the same ballot as the for
Right.
Right.
voters. Anything else?
I've just got a curiosity question. How do you contract for these repairs and all that kind of stuff? You do that through the school district?
We put out a bid, or we put out basically a request for proposals, and then companies who do a lot of these projects know that there's a possibility to bid on this particular project, so they submit their bids, and then we go through a review process and pick out the ones that we think are going to meet the needs of the school district. So price, experience, quality, you look at who the people are who have done things, so you try and figure out from there, okay, this company's got a good reputation of completing school projects, they know what they're doing, they've done this before, let's go with them, their price comes in. Sometimes if you go with the lowest bid, it could be someone who's never done that type of project before, or their quality is not very good. So it's not just about who's got the lowest bid, it's also about the quality and what they can bring to the particular project.
Now, who evaluates the bids?
We have our facilities director of finance and operations, our facilities manager, who does that, again, who's gone through several of the projects based. And then they just evaluate that, usually call around, do reference checks, just like hiring somebody. Call around, do reference checks to make sure that the people have done okay. How did their bids come in? Did they come in on point? Were they more expensive? Did they finish on time? Were they late? Did you have any major headaches or issues with the particular contractors? So you just do your background check on them.
Their experience with major construction projects in evaluating contractors on those.
Yes.
If it passes, it goes up to about $435 per 1,000. Is that what you're?
On the levy costs, it would go up to $397, and then you've got the bond
Plus the
added
bond.
into there.
Right.
Yeah.
How does that compare to other school districts in the area?
It's it's a little bit higher again because our valuation isn't as high as some of the surrounding areas, but definitely not the most within the state. You have some places. Some of it depends on the levy and their capacity to do levies, but you have places that have their regular maintenance and operation levies. So one of the highest in the state. You've got some along the I-5 corridor, and currently we're bound by a 28% cap on our local levy, which right now we're at only 24%. That's what we do. This is a separate levy that doesn't necessarily count against that because it's a capital levy. You have other districts that the highest in the state that I know of, I think, can go up to 38%. They were grandfathered in. So typically there's a ceiling to which you can go. In the past it had been 24%, but in the last couple of legislative sessions they raised the levy locally so that you could go out and ask for more when the state wasn't able to provide the funding that they were supposed to. So depending on some of those districts and where they are and whether or not they're maxing out at 30-some%, their rates can be much higher. Or if you're in a smaller district that doesn't have a lot of valuation, it would cost a lot to raise a lot of money. You know, if you're a Seattle, you can charge 25 cents per thousand, it's going to get you $125 million. But if you're in a small place like Chimicum, you know, 25 cents per thousand is going to get you $100,000. It's just totally different levels of what you have. So it gets difficult to do. That's why some places, they almost never run bonds or levies because they know it's just going to put it out of range for their particular citizenry. And there are a lot of places that go through multiple years of levy or bond failures, and it's a challenge because then their schools still need to be addressed, and if they don't have the ability to be able to raise that money locally, it can be a challenge.
Are you guys pretty confident with this? What's your sense so far? How are you gonna be out talking to people?
Yeah, we go, you know, our job is really just to present the facts. We can't advocate one way or another. We just let people know what the facts are, and then we just encourage people to vote. That's all.
Because maybe I'm curious what you're hearing back so far.
Hard to say. I mean, I just talked to the Bremerton Schools Committee and our Citizens for Good Schools, and, you know, they seem pretty positive about it. So I got to trust what their judgment is right now.
Yeah. I think our job is just to educate and to make sure that everybody understands what it is.
Okay.
And so that's our job. And
What kind of technology improvements exactly are you looking at?
Again, I mean, it's going to be investment in hardware, software, and IT support. So I couldn't tell you exactly what the hardware is.
What do you mean by IT support? More people?
Probably one more person to go out and help out with what we do. During assessment season, which is in the spring, our technology department is totally focused on making sure that all of the hardware is operating efficiently as the students are taking their assessments online. So that means if you're in a school or you're in a grade level that is not being assessed and you have a technical issue, there's nobody there to respond to what else is going on.
What do you mean by infrastructure? If you're not going Wi-Fi, if you're still doing cabling, then you're behind the times.
Oh no, we're Wi-Fi in every building.
Good.
Yeah, our infrastructure is solid. It's pretty good, but we still need to expand the reliability of that Wi-Fi and make sure it's secure. As we look at more and more devices, as you know, I mean, sometimes if you have too many wireless devices in one particular spot, it can overwhelm it, and then you get a bog down in your bottleneck in your technology. So we want to make sure that we have reliable infrastructure in place, and there's always improvements in either routers or the capacity for, you know, repeaters out there.
So you're just increasing the bandwidth.
Yes. Yeah. And shapers, we have something that's called the shaper that routes traffic in and out, places priority in certain spots, filters out the unwanted email, spam, all of that kind of stuff. And it's a challenge because anytime there's a positive technology, there's a downside to technology too. So people use that to either try and get onto your system, or sometimes you just get flooded with, you know, junk that bogs it down.
These days, 70% of the effort is system security, and not so much technology.
Yeah,
you're right.
which is unfortunate. And we have more students that have devices that are capable of being on there too. So at some point, we'd like to move to the ability to integrate students bringing their own technology and how we can use that in instruction. But that means we also have to make sure that the systems we have don't get overwhelmed by that. So we're always looking to the future as much as possible.
Well, thanks for coming and helping us understand.
Sure.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And follow up if we have more questions.
Yeah, anytime.